The stars shivered as the Zenthroni warships glided through the void. Their enormous vessels sliced through darkness like shards of crystal and steel. Every ship dwarfed most orbital stations. The hulls glowed with an icy blue radiance that forced other races to turn away in terror. The Zenthroni weren't like other creatures in the cosmos. They possessed no tender flesh or flowing blood. Their forms consisted of living crystal that sprouted from their homeworld, buried in the galaxy's heart. They towered at 12 feet on average. Their appendages were jagged and geometric like shattered glass. Where other beings had eyes, the Zenthroni displayed clusters of brilliant gems that perceived countless wavelengths of light. For a millennium, the Zenthroni Empire had expanded relentlessly. They had seized 400 worlds. They had wiped out innumerable races. They had imprisoned millions of creatures. Their science surpassed what most civilizations could comprehend. Their armaments could shatter planets. Their barriers could withstand the energy of suns. The Zenthroni considered themselves flawless. They viewed all other organisms as errors requiring correction or elimination. They labeled organic existence the soft plague and believed cleansing the galaxy of such frailty was their sacred duty. Every race they encountered faced identical options: servitude or extinction. In the grand crystal metropolises of their origin world, the Zenthroni maintained meticulous archives of every race they'd obliterated. They possessed chambers filled with the dying moments of vanquished peoples. They replayed these recordings as amusement. The cries and desperate pleas of conquered foes sounded like melody to their crystalline hearing. Their domain was governed by the Crystal Council, 7 ageless Zenthroni who had existed for millennia. These entities had witnessed countless societies rise and crumble. They had observed as their armadas transformed verdant planets into barren stones drifting in emptiness. They experienced no compassion or remorse. For them, domination felt as instinctive as breathing. The Zenthroni military organized into massive armadas. Each armada wielded sufficient firepower to annihilate whole star systems. The vessels answered to War Masters, elite Zenthroni fighters who had distinguished themselves across hundreds of campaigns. These War Masters competed to see who could crush civilizations most rapidly. War Master Kathvar ranked among the Empire's most dreaded commanders. He had directly supervised the destruction of 47 species. His command ship, the Crystal Fang, was a colossal dreadnought capable of splitting moons with one blast. Kathvar prided himself on collecting the final broadcasts of dying races. He stored them in his personal quarters and replayed them to commemorate his triumphs. The Zenthroni harbored special contempt for what they termed water worlds, planets blanketed in oceans supporting carbon-based organisms. The Zenthroni found such places revolting. The concept of life swimming in liquid made their crystal bodies quiver with disgust. They had engineered specialized weapons exclusively for destroying water worlds, converting their seas to vapor and their land masses to glass. Most species throughout the cosmos knew about the Zenthroni. They were the nightmare that guardians invoked to frighten younglings. Trading routes shifted to bypass Zenthroni territory. Entire populations had relocated to the galaxy's distant rim simply to escape the Crystal Empire. Zenthroni conquest followed an unchanging blueprint. Initially, their reconnaissance craft would locate a new system harboring intelligent life. These scouts would observe the target species for months. They would analyze their science, their numbers, and their defensive capabilities. The scouts also hunted for anything precious the Empire might wish to preserve. After the scouts completed their assessment, a Zenthroni armada would materialize. The fleet would establish position just beyond the target system and transmit a declaration. The declaration remained constant. You have been selected for absorption into the Zenthroni Empire. Submit now, and portions of your population may serve as laborers. Defy us, and your entire race faces eradication. You have 72 standard hours to choose. Some species capitulated instantly. They had heard tales about Zenthroni might and selected bondage over death. These fortunate civilizations were stripped of their technology and their strongest individuals. The remainder were transported to penal worlds where they spent existence, excavating crystals for their overlords. Other species elected to resist. These courageous civilizations dispatched their fleets against the Zenthroni invaders. The conflicts never endured long. Zenthroni science simply proved too advanced. Their energy barriers absorbed tremendous punishment. Their weapons obliterated vessels from astounding ranges. Most critically, their faster-than-light drives enabled them to manifest anywhere on a battlefield instantaneously. The longest opposition the Zenthroni had encountered persisted 6 standard days. That was the Corvani defense, an alliance of 12 species united to halt Zenthroni expansion. They had constructed massive orbital fortifications and equipped them with the finest weaponry their combined knowledge could produce. They had drilled for decades specifically to combat the crystal invaders. The engagement was spectacular and horrific. Thousands of vessels clashed across multiple star systems. The combined forces of 12 species unleashed everything against the Zenthroni battalions. Briefly, it appeared the Crystal Empire might actually be halted, but the Zenthroni had waged war for 1,000 years. They understood every tactic organic species might employ. When the coalition forces were fully engaged in combat, the Zenthroni unveiled weapons none had witnessed before. Planet-destroying projectiles that could eliminate worlds in minutes, gravity explosives that generated artificial singularities, vessels that could phase between dimensions. By the 6th day's conclusion, the Corvani defense lay completely shattered. 12 species had become empty void and drifting wreckage. The Zenthroni archived their final transmissions in the Imperial repository. War Master Kathvar himself had directed that operation, and it remained his greatest glory. Now the Zenthroni Empire gazed toward the galaxy's outer edge. Many systems there remained unconquered. The Crystal Council had determined it was time to finish purifying that sector. They had identified dozens of species still living freely on their modest worlds. One of these species called themselves humans. They inhabited a blue water world in a single star system. Zenthroni scouts had been monitoring them for months. The humans appeared to be a typical young race. They had only recently achieved spaceflight. Their largest craft were minuscule compared to Zenthroni vessels. Their armaments relied on crude chemical reactions and atomic fusion. Scout assessments characterized humans as remarkably ordinary. They were small organic creatures with pale pink tissue and diminutive teeth. They lived brief existences under a century. They appeared to spend considerable time conflicting among themselves over resources and territory. Their technology was developing quickly, but they remained thousands of years behind Zenthroni achievement. The humans possessed one intriguing trait. They seemed unusually persistent for such a fragile species. Scouts had examined their history and discovered that humans seldom surrendered even when facing insurmountable challenges. They would continue struggling long after any sensible being would yield. This was viewed as a minor curiosity rather than serious concern. War Master Kathvar had requested authorization to manage the human conquest personally. The Crystal Council had approved, believing it would be a straightforward assignment to enhance his record. They anticipated the humans would surrender swiftly once they witnessed a Zenthroni fleet's power. Otherwise, the conquest would likely require less than 1 day. The armada assembled for the human conquest was smaller than typical, merely 50 ships, including Kathvar's command vessel. This was deemed more than adequate firepower to handle a single primitive planet. Some Crystal Council members thought even 50 ships was excessive for such a weak target. As the Zenthroni fleet prepared to depart for human territory, excitement rippled throughout the Empire. Word of the impending conquest had reached every crystal city. Citizens congregated in public venues to observe the live transmissions that would display another organic species destruction. Wagering pools opened on how rapidly the humans would capitulate. The Zenthroni had conquered so many species they had developed routine expectations. They knew precisely how long each civilization type would endure. Waterworld species typically surrendered within hours. Desert species might battle for a day or two. The few spacefaring civilizations they had encountered usually lasted roughly a week before complete annihilation. Humans were classified as a waterworld species with primitive space capability. Official projections estimated they would surrender within 6 hours of observing the Zenthroni fleet. If they chose combat, they would be eliminated within 24 hours. These forecasts relied on a millennium of conquest experience. The Zenthroni didn't realize they were mistaken. They didn't realize humans differed from every other species they had encountered. They didn't realize humans had been observing them just as meticulously as they had observed humans. Most significantly, they didn't realize humans had been preparing for this moment far longer than anyone suspected possible. The Zenthroni Empire continued its millennial routine. Ships traversed space. Weapons charged. Archives prepared to document another victory. The crystal beings readied themselves for what they expected to be the simplest conquest in their extensive history. They had no notion they were about to commit the gravest error any species had made. They had no notion they were sailing toward their own annihilation. They had no notion that the small, tender humans they planned to destroy would soon become the galaxy's most feared force. The Zenthroni Armada flew through darkness toward Earth, carrying the confidence of 1,000 years of victories. Behind them, their empire maintained daily routine, never imagining these would be the final normal days they would ever experience. The warning arrived on a Tuesday morning, Earth Standard Time. Deep space monitoring stations detected the energy signatures first. Massive objects were traveling through faster-than-light space toward the solar system. The readings were unlike anything humans had observed before. Dr. Sarah Chen was the first person to comprehend what the readings meant. She worked at the Titan Observatory, one of humanity's most sophisticated space monitoring installations. When the computer warnings erupted, she thought equipment malfunction must be occurring. The energy levels were simply too extreme to be genuine, but the readings persisted from multiple stations. Deep space arrays throughout the solar system were detecting identical phenomena. Something enormous was approaching Earth, something containing more energy than entire star systems. Within hours, the intelligence had reached every government on Earth. Emergency assemblies were convened. Military commanders gathered in fortified bunkers. Scientists labored frantically to comprehend what was approaching. The general population remained unaware, but those in authority understood humanity was about to confront something unprecedented. The objects emerged from faster-than-light travel at the solar system's edge. 50 massive crystalline vessels appeared in flawless formation, each exceeding Earth's largest space stations. Their hulls reflected starlight in patterns that pained human eyes to observe directly. Energy readings spiked so dramatically that several monitoring stations had to shut down to prevent damage. For 6 hours, the alien armada simply waited. They made no communication attempts. They performed no scans that human equipment could register. They merely hung in space like a wall of crystal and steel, obscuring entire star sections. Then the transmission came. Every radio frequency on Earth received it simultaneously. Every television network, every internet connection, every communication device suddenly carried identical transmission. The voice was frigid and razor-sharp like glass, fragmenting in slow motion. "Primitive creatures of the third planet from this system's star," the voice stated. "You are being addressed by War Master Kathvar of the Zenthroni Empire. Your species has been designated for integration into our great civilization." The transmission continued for several minutes. It described the Zenthroni Empire and their millennium of conquest. It explained how hundreds of species had already been integrated or eliminated. It enumerated the achievements of Zenthroni science and their military forces' might. "You have 2 choices," War Master Kathvar concluded. "Submit immediately, and some members of your species will be permitted to exist as servants. Resist, and your entire world will be sterilized. You have 72 standard hours to make your decision. Choose wisely." The transmission ended, leaving Earth in shocked silence. Within minutes, every major news organization was broadcasting the alien message. Panic began spreading across the planet. Financial markets collapsed. Cities experienced massive traffic congestion as people attempted to flee to countryside areas. Religious leaders proclaimed apocalypse had arrived. Military forces worldwide went to maximum alert. But in certain covert facilities, a very different reaction was occurring. Deep beneath the Colorado mountains, in a facility that officially didn't exist, Admiral Marcus Webb received a coded message on his personal communicator. The message contained only 3 words. Protocol 7. Execute. Admiral Webb had been anticipating this message his entire career. He had trained for it, strategized for it, and dreaded it. Now that it had finally materialized, he felt strangely composed. He approached a vault requiring 3 different authorization types to open. Inside was a single folder marked with symbols most humans wouldn't recognize. Similar scenarios were unfolding in hidden facilities worldwide, in subterranean bases, in orbital stations, in research centers camouflaged as ordinary structures. Humans were opening sealed directives and activating systems that had been dormant for decades. The general population didn't know about these facilities. Most government officials didn't know about them. They were part of a program that had begun long before Zenthroni scouts had arrived in human space. They were humanity's safeguard against a threat many had hoped would never materialize. 50 years earlier, human deep space probes had detected evidence of the Zenthroni Empire. The probes had discovered destroyed worlds, vacant systems, and debris patterns suggesting massive space conflicts. Human scientists had analyzed the information and reached a terrifying conclusion. Something in the galaxy was systematically destroying other civilizations. A secret international committee had been established to study the threat. They called it the Xenocide Prevention Project. Their mission was straightforward: determine how to protect humanity from whatever was destroying other species. The project received unlimited funding and access to humanity's finest minds. Everything they did was classified far beyond normal government security levels. For 50 years, the project had been preparing. They had constructed weapons that officially didn't exist. They had developed technologies supposedly impossible. They had formulated strategies assuming humanity would someday face an enemy with vastly superior conventional technology. Now that day had arrived. As panic spread across Earth's surface, Admiral Webb was issuing directives to facilities the public had never heard of. Vessels that didn't appear on any official registry began powering up their engines. Weapon systems tested only in computer simulations came online for the first time. The Zenthroni fleet remained at the solar system's edge, confident in their overwhelming superiority. War Master Kathvar was pleased with the human reaction. The panic and chaos on Earth's surface was precisely what he expected from a primitive species facing certain doom. Kathvar had dealt with thousands of civilizations over his extensive career. He knew all the patterns. First came denial, then panic, then desperate negotiation attempts, and finally either surrender or futile resistance. The humans were following the script perfectly. On the second day, Earth's governments attempted to establish diplomatic contact with the Zenthroni fleet. They transmitted messages offering to negotiate terms for peaceful coexistence. They promised to share human technology and resources. They begged for additional time to consider the Zenthroni ultimatum. War Master Kathvar ignored these messages completely. The Zenthroni didn't negotiate with inferior species. They conquered or they destroyed. No other options existed. Meanwhile, human space forces appeared to be in complete chaos. Vessels were launched from Earth in all directions, apparently transporting refugees fleeing the planet. Military craft took defensive positions around major population centers. Construction crews worked desperately to build additional orbital defenses. To Zenthroni observers, it looked exactly as expected, a desperate, disorganized response from a species with no hope of mounting effective resistance. The refugee ships were particularly amusing to War Master Kathvar. Where did these humans believe they could flee that Zenthroni fleets couldn't pursue? On the third day, with only hours remaining before the deadline, Earth's leaders transmitted one final message to the Zenthroni fleet. The transmission was concise and delivered by a man who identified himself as Admiral Webb, commander of United Earth Defense Forces. His words were simple and direct. "We have received your ultimatum and considered our options carefully. Our response is as follows. Leave our solar system immediately or face the consequences. You have 1 hour to comply with this demand." When this message reached the Zenthroni fleet, War Master Kathvar actually laughed. The sound resembled crystal chimes being destroyed with hammers. His officers shared his amusement. The notion that these primitive humans would dare threaten the Zenthroni Empire was beyond absurd. Kathvar decided to share the human message with the entire empire. He broadcast it on all communication channels, adding his own commentary about organic species foolishness. Across hundreds of Zenthroni worlds, crystal beings assembled to laugh at the humans' pathetic defiance attempt. The broadcast became one of the most popular entertainment programs in Zenthroni history. Citizens shared it with friends and family. Children played games pretending to be brave humans, threatening mighty Zenthroni warriors. It was all very entertaining. War Master Kathvar used the human message as an opportunity to demonstrate Zenthroni superiority. He explained to his audience how human technology lagged thousands of years behind Zenthroni science. He described the primitive weapons Earth's military forces possessed. He compared human space vessels to toys that Zenthroni children might play with. "These humans have ships that burn chemical fuel," Kathvar said during his broadcast. "They have weapons that throw metal pieces at their enemies. They have lived on only one world for their entire existence as a species, yet they dare threaten us. It would be amusing if it weren't so pathetic." The hour deadline arrived and passed. Admiral Webb's ultimatum was disregarded. The Zenthroni fleet began advancing toward Earth, their massive ships accelerating to combat speed. Energy signatures spiked as weapon systems came online. The conquest of humanity was about to commence. War Master Kathvar ordered his ships into standard attack formation. The largest vessels would establish orbital bombardment positions around Earth. Smaller ships would eliminate any human space forces that attempted interference. The entire operation was expected to require less than 6 hours. As the Zenthroni fleet crossed Neptune's orbit, Kathvar prepared to issue the attack order. He had personally overseen the destruction of 47 species. This would be number 48. After today, humans would join the extensive list of civilizations existing only in Zenthroni record libraries. But something was amiss. Kathvar's sensor operators were reporting anomalous readings from throughout the solar system. The refugee ships that had fled Earth weren't where they should be. Instead of fleeing the battle, they seemed to be taking positions around the Zenthroni fleet. More concerning were the energy readings from these ships. They were far too elevated for the primitive human technology Zenthroni scouts had observed. Some vessels were generating power signatures rivaling Zenthroni destroyers. "War Master," his chief sensor operator reported, "I am detecting weapons locks from multiple human vessels. Their targeting systems are far more sophisticated than our intelligence reports indicated." Kathvar studied the tactical display with mounting confusion. The human ships weren't fleeing in panic. They weren't pleading for mercy. Instead, they were surrounding his fleet in a flawless attack formation. Their movements displayed coordination and tactical proficiency that should have been impossible for such a primitive species. "All ships raise defensive shields," Kathvar ordered. "Prepare for immediate combat operations." As Zenthroni shields came online, Admiral Webb's voice echoed across all communication frequencies one final time. "You were warned. You chose not to listen. Now you will learn why humans are different from every other species you have conquered." The first shot came from a ship that resembled an ordinary cargo freighter. One moment it was drifting silently near Jupiter's orbit, appearing harmless and insignificant. The next moment, space itself seemed to tear open as a beam of pure energy erupted from its hull. The beam struck the Zenthroni destroyer shard's edge dead center. For a split second, nothing appeared to happen. Then the massive crystal ship simply ceased to exist. There was no explosion, no debris field, no death cry from the crew. The destroyer was there, and then it wasn't, as if reality had decided it never existed in the first place. War Master Kathvar stared at his tactical display in disbelief. The readings made no sense. A primitive human vessel had just erased one of his ships using a weapon that defied all known physics laws. The energy signature was unlike anything in Zenthroni databases. "All ships, evasive maneuvers," Kathvar commanded. "Return fire immediately." The Zenthroni fleet responded with practiced efficiency. 50 crystalline ships opened fire simultaneously, unleashing enough destructive power to sterilize entire planets. Their energy beams and plasma cannons illuminated the darkness between worlds. Any conventional fleet would have been vaporized instantly, but the human ships weren't conventional. As Zenthroni weapons struck their targets, the human vessels seemed to shimmer and fade. Energy beams passed harmlessly through hulls that suddenly became translucent. Plasma bolts struck shields that absorbed the attacks and somehow redirected the energy back at the Zenthroni ships. 3 more. Zenthroni destroyers vanished under return fire that used their own weapons against them. The crystal ship's advanced sensors couldn't comprehend what they were witnessing. The human vessels appeared to be phasing in and out of normal space, existing in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Impossible, Kathvar snarled. These readings cannot be accurate. No species has this technology. His sensor officer was frantically checking and rechecking the instruments. War Master, all systems are functioning normally. The human ships are using some form of dimensional manipulation. They are shifting between space-time layers to avoid our attacks. More human ships revealed themselves throughout the solar system. They had been concealing in asteroid fields, behind moons, and within gas giants' rings. Each vessel began broadcasting targeting solutions to the others, creating a coordinated attack network encompassing the entire battlefield. The Zenthroni found themselves surrounded by an enemy that shouldn't have existed. Ships that looked like simple mining vessels opened weapon ports to reveal cannons that tore holes in reality. Cargo haulers deployed armor plating that seemed to bend light around itself. Even small human fighters demonstrated technology that was theoretically impossible. War Master Kathvar activated the emergency communication array and transmitted a desperate message back to Zenthroni space. This is Kathvar. The intelligence reports were completely wrong. The humans have weapons and defenses far beyond what we expected. I am requesting immediate reinforcement. The reply came back within minutes. The Crystal Council's response was cold and dismissive. War Master Kathvar, you are fighting a single primitive world with 50 ships of the line. Complete your mission or face charges of incompetence upon your return. Kathvar closed the communication channel and focused on the battle. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly. His fleet had been reduced to 37 ships while the humans continued revealing new vessels from hidden positions throughout the solar system. The human attack pattern was unlike anything in Zenthroni military doctrine. Instead of focusing their fire on single targets, they seemed to be herding the Zenthroni fleet into a specific area of space. Every time Kathvar tried to break his ships out of the encirclement, human forces would appear to block his escape routes. War Master, his navigation officer reported. The humans are forcing us toward the asteroid belt between the 4th and 5th planets. I believe they are attempting to trap us in that region. Kathvar studied the tactical display and realized the officer was correct. The human attack pattern wasn't random. It was carefully designed to push the Zenthroni fleet into a predetermined location. But why would the humans want to fight in an asteroid field? The space rocks would provide cover for both sides equally. The answer came when the Zenthroni fleet reached the asteroid belt's edge. What Kathvar had assumed were natural space rocks suddenly came alive with weapons fire. The asteroids weren't asteroids at all. They were camouflaged human battle stations, each one larger than a Zenthroni dreadnought. The trap closed like a massive predator's jaws. Dozens of hidden fortress ships opened fire simultaneously, creating an energy storm that turned space itself into a killing field. The human weapons didn't simply destroy their targets. They seemed to unravel them at the molecular level, reducing proud Zenthroni vessels to their basic atomic components. Kathvar's flagship shuddered as multiple hits penetrated its shields. Damage reports flooded in from all sections of the ship. The Crystal Fang, which had survived hundreds of battles across the galaxy, was being systematically torn apart by weapons that shouldn't have existed. Emergency jump to faster-than-light travel, Kathvar ordered. All surviving ships, retreat immediately. But when his navigation officer tried to activate the jump drive, nothing happened. The faster-than-light engines were completely unresponsive. Similar reports came in from the remaining Zenthroni ships. Their most advanced technology, the foundation of their military superiority, had been somehow disabled. War Master, the humans have deployed some kind of dimensional anchor, the navigation officer reported. It is preventing any transition to faster-than-light space. We are trapped in normal space until the field is disabled. Kathvar felt something he hadn't experienced in over 2,000 years of life. Fear. The humans had not only matched Zenthroni technology, they had surpassed it. They had weapons that could erase matter from existence. They had shields that could redirect energy attacks. They had stealth systems that could hide entire fleets. Most terrifyingly, they had dimensional technology that could prevent faster-than-light travel. The battle continued for another 3 hours, but the outcome had been decided in the first few minutes. The Zenthroni fleet was systematically destroyed by an enemy that had spent 50 years preparing for this exact confrontation. Ship after ship vanished under human fire until only a handful of vessels remained. When Kathvar's flagship was the last Zenthroni ship still capable of fighting, Admiral Webb's voice came over the communication channels again. War Master Kathvar, you have two choices. Surrender immediately and you will be taken prisoner. Continue fighting and your ship will be destroyed like all the others. You have 60 seconds to decide. Kathvar looked around his command bridge. Half of his officers were dead. Most of his ship's systems were offline. The Crystal Fang was bleeding atmosphere and energy from dozens of hull breaches. His proud fleet had been reduced to floating debris. For the first time in Zenthroni history, a War Master surrendered to an enemy force. I yield, Kathvar transmitted, his voice barely a whisper. The Crystal Fang surrenders to human forces. Within minutes, human boarding craft had docked with the damaged Zenthroni flagship. Armed humans in advanced combat armor moved through the ship's corridors, securing prisoners and gathering intelligence. They worked with efficient professionalism that reminded Kathvar of his own troops during successful conquests. Admiral Webb himself came aboard the Crystal Fang to accept Kathvar's surrender. The human was smaller than the War Master had expected, but his eyes held the cold certainty of a being who had just achieved total victory. You lied to us, Kathvar said when Webb entered the command bridge. Your scouts reported primitive technology, chemical rockets and nuclear weapons. This level of advancement should have taken you thousands of years to achieve. Webb smiled without humor. Our scouts reported exactly what we wanted them to see. Every piece of technology your people observed was carefully designed to make you underestimate us. We have been preparing for your arrival for 50 years. Kathvar's crystal form shimmered with shock. 50 years? But how did you know we were coming? We have been watching your empire since before you knew we existed, Webb replied. We found the debris fields you left behind. We analyzed the patterns of destruction across hundreds of star systems. We knew that eventually you would come for us. The Admiral gestured toward the tactical display showing the destroyed Zenthroni fleet. Every weapon you saw today was designed specifically to counter Zenthroni technology. Every strategy we used was developed from studying your previous conquests. We learned from the mistakes of every species you destroyed. Kathvar felt his crystal core growing cold with a new kind of terror. What are you going to do with me? Webb's expression became even harder. You are going to tell us everything about your empire, every fleet position, every colony world, every military installation. You are going to give us complete intelligence about Zenthroni capabilities and weaknesses. And if I refuse, then you will watch as we systematically destroy every trace of Zenthroni civilization in the galaxy. Your choice is simple. Help us target your military forces specifically or be responsible for the complete extinction of your species. Kathvar was quiet for a long moment. Around him, human soldiers continued their efficient work of securing the ship. They moved like beings who had been planning this operation for decades. Every action was precise and purposeful. You cannot possibly threaten our entire empire, Kathvar said finally. We have thousands of ships scattered across hundreds of worlds. Even with your advanced technology, you are still just one species on one world. Admiral Webb walked to the main view screen and activated an external camera view. What Kathvar saw made his crystal form tremble with disbelief. The space around Earth was filled with human ships, not dozens or hundreds, but thousands. Massive dreadnoughts that dwarfed anything in the Zenthroni fleet. Carriers that launched swarms of fighters equipped with reality-warping weapons. Battle stations that were larger than most space habitats. This was just our local defense fleet, Webb said calmly. Our main attack forces are already deploying throughout the galaxy. By the time this conversation ends, human fleets will be in position to strike every major Zenthroni installation simultaneously. Kathvar stared at the impossible armada surrounding Earth. How many ships do you have? Enough, Webb replied. We have been building this fleet in hidden shipyards for 5 decades. Every resource we could spare went into preparing for this war. We built ships in asteroid fields where your scouts would never look. We constructed weapons in deep space factories that don't appear on any star charts. The Admiral turned back to face Kathvar directly. Your empire made one fatal mistake. You assumed that because we appeared primitive, we actually were primitive. You never considered that an intelligent species might choose to hide their true capabilities until the moment they were needed. Webb activated a communication panel and spoke into it. Admiral Chen, you are authorized to begin Phase 2 operations. All human fleets are cleared to engage Zenthroni targets galaxy-wide. As acknowledgement signals began arriving from human forces across known space, Kathvar realized that his empire was about to face something it had never encountered before. An enemy that was stronger, smarter, and more ruthless than themselves. The last thing Kathvar heard before being escorted to a detention cell was Admiral Webb speaking to his command staff. Gentlemen, the Zenthroni Empire has 30 days to release every slave species and withdraw to their homeworld. If they refuse, we will do what they have been doing to others for 1,000 years. The only difference is that we will be much more thorough about it. The Crystal Council met in emergency session for the first time in 300 years. The 7 ancient rulers of the Zenthroni Empire gathered in their great hall on the homeworld, their crystalline forms glowing with agitation and disbelief. Before them floated a holographic display showing the complete destruction of War Master Kathvar's fleet. High Counselor Vexathorn, eldest of the 7, spoke first. His voice carried the weight of 4,000 years of life and conquest. This recording must be fabricated. No single primitive world could possess such technology. The quantum signatures are authentic, replied Counselor Morath, who oversaw the Empire's intelligence networks. Our sensors confirm that 50 ships of the line were destroyed or captured by human forces. Kathvar himself is being held prisoner. The council chamber fell silent except for the harmonic resonance of crystal beings in deep thought. For 1,000 years, the Zenthroni had been the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Their technology was supreme. Their military was invincible. The idea that some unknown species could challenge them was beyond comprehension. Perhaps this is an isolated incident, suggested Counselor Ryath. One world with unusual defenses. We can simply avoid that system and continue expansion in other directions. High Counselor Vexathorn's crystal form flared with anger. We do not avoid anything. The Zenthroni Empire has never retreated from any enemy. We will not begin now because of one setback. But even as the council debated, reports were arriving from across the Empire. Human fleets had appeared in dozens of star systems simultaneously. They were not engaging Zenthroni forces directly. Instead, they were positioning themselves near major installations and broadcasting a simple message. The Zenthroni Empire has 30 days to release all enslaved species and withdraw to your homeworld. Failure to comply will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. This is your only warning. The message was delivered in perfect Zenthroni language, suggesting that humans had thoroughly studied their culture and technology. More disturbing were the energy readings from the human ships. Each vessel carried enough firepower to threaten entire Zenthroni battle groups. How many ships are we facing? Asked Counselor Drafan, the Empire's chief military strategist. Our current estimates suggest at least 10,000 human vessels, Morath replied. Possibly more. They are equipped with technology that our scientists cannot explain. Some appear to be capable of faster-than-light travel without using conventional jump drives. Counselor Siles, youngest of the 7 at only 800 years old, made an unprecedented suggestion. Perhaps we should consider negotiating with these humans. If their technology is truly superior to ours, we might learn from them. The other council members turned toward her with expressions of shock and disgust. The idea of negotiating with any species was anathema to Zenthroni philosophy. They were the supreme race. They did not negotiate. They conquered or they destroyed. The Empire does not negotiate with inferior species, High Counselor Vexathorn declared. Send the 7th Fleet to engage the nearest human formation. We will demonstrate that yesterday's defeat was merely an anomaly. The 7th Fleet was one of the Empire's most powerful military formations, 200 ships led by War Master Zalketh, a veteran of 600 conquest campaigns. If any force could restore Zenthroni prestige, it would be the 7th Fleet. War Master Zalketh received his orders with enthusiasm. He had studied the recordings of Kathvar's defeat and believed he understood what had gone wrong. Kathvar had been overconfident and unprepared for advanced technology. Zalketh would not make the same mistakes. The 7th Fleet deployed with full combat protocols. Every ship was equipped with the most advanced Zenthroni weapons and shields. Scout vessels were sent ahead to gather detailed intelligence about human capabilities. Nothing would be left to chance. The fleet's target was a human formation orbiting a Zenthroni mining colony in the Andorian sector. 20 human ships were positioned near the asteroid facilities where millions of enslaved aliens worked to extract rare crystals for the Empire. The human vessels made no attempt to hide their presence. They simply waited in perfect formation. "They are either supremely confident or completely insane," Zalketh observed as his fleet approached the human position. 200 ships against 20. Even with their advanced technology, they cannot hope to survive. The human fleet commander identified himself as Admiral Rodriguez of the United Earth Defense Forces. His message to Zalketh was brief and professional. "You are ordered to withdraw from this system immediately and release all enslaved beings. Failure to comply will result in